Good afternoon. On biak gani sing tomo. Na tsaramu tsemu. Kaupo tsa bitsaya umu. My name is Matthew Martinez. I'm currently the Deputy Director at the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture. And the title of my talk is Honoring the Spirit of Ogapoge, Exhibiting Place and Context. So really thinking about this notion of expanding context, I want to take it to our discussion and kind of building upon context when we think about where we're situated within Santa Fe, within the indigenous landscape of the Americas. So with that, I just want to also do a land acknowledgement to the Tewa people, Tiwa, Towa, Keres, and all the indigenous communities that we're privileged to be a part of today. So I'm going to talk about land and context from a larger macro perspective, and then kind of narrow down to some examples with the Girard collection. Without corn, there's no song. Without song, there's no dance. Without dance, there's no rain. Without rain, there's no corn. Robert Mirabel. These English translated words convey relationships and continuity. The words cycle back, in and out, and around, and really embody the spirit of place and context. Along the Rio Grande is a vast landscape of mountain ranges, rivers, and valleys, rich in agricultural land and history, with nearby petroglyphs dating back 10,000 plus years. Our ancestors' daily life consisted of planting, running, and hunting mastodons, elk, and deer around the Santa Fe Basin. Like a necklace of knotted cords, the Northern Rio Grande corridor weaves together ancestral homelands like Chaco Canyon, Puye Cliffs, Bandolier, and many other villages and places that continue to feed Santa Fe's memory and spirit. Referred in Tewa as Ogapoge, which translates to white shell water place. This place, like indigenous peoples and animals, continue to embody interrelatedness of all things since time immemorial. Pueblo people have always written history, and we continue to be shaped by text and pottery, weavings, and petroglyphs, documenting migration patterns and seasonal rotations. We are a people of stories, and our dance rhythms and motions are stories within stories. Through story, life is created. This is our pathway. Remembering and honoring place is really the essence of Pueblo people. The place we honor, Ogapoge, is built upon all those who came before and those who will come after us. To quote Herman Agoyo, former governor and councilman, who said this about petroglyphs: "To us, these petroglyphs are not the remnants of some long-lost civilization that has been dead for many. They are part of our living culture. What is stored in petroglyphs is not written in any history book or in a book or to be found in any library. We need to return to them to remind us of who we are and where we came from, and teach our own sons and daughters of it." Indigenous peoples are inherently connected to land. Our creation stories tell about emergence from lakes, mountains, and streams. Everything is connected. Nothing is separate, meaning that rock people, cloud people, corn people, animal people, and people are all related. The notions of relations fundamentally defines how Pueblo people experience the world. The Pueblos have always had a relationship with other indigenous peoples. This is evident in our borrowed words, food and dress. Beyond the Southwest, we traded coral and shells, which continue to be used in dance, as well as other items, such as macaw feathers and chocolate. Between the 11th and 14th centuries, the Southwest was a trading hub for Mesoamericans and Pueblos. Mexica, another Nahuatl-speaking Mesoamerican people, bartered perhaps beans for gems unique to the Southwest, such as turquoise. Up on the upper right here, turquoise, these examples are found as far away as Chichen Itza, in a region where no turquoise mines ever existed. There's exact remnants that the turquoise found came from Cerrillo's mines here in Santa Fe. Pueblos have always practiced a way of life free of geographic borders while remaining within a localized homeland. This bit of context serves as a backdrop for what may not be included as part of the Girard ring. Up in the hallway here, we are greeted by the Italian proverb, and I'm going to butcher the Italian pronunciation. Tutto il mondo è il paese. The world is hometown. A saying Alexander Girard liked to quote, and I've seen it stated several times, as a guiding principle of collecting folk art. As mentioned, in a similar vein, Girard's contemporary, Georgia O'Keeffe, she once stated this about the Pedernal Mountain, quote, "It belongs to me. God told me if I painted it enough, I could have it." Girard and O'Keeffe, like many other artists, travel writers, pottery collectors who settled in New Mexico, engaged in collecting, cataloging, and painting, quote, the other, deeply entrenched in settler colonial practices. We know here as colleagues, those of us in museums and other similar professions, that museums really became a logical venue to perpetuate systems of privilege as neatly packaged worlds and hometowns. Pueblos, the Spanish word imposed to the indigenous peoples, translates as townspeoples, were key to Girard's universe. In multiple visions, this village section lends itself really to several lenses of interpretation. Some of you have already touched upon this. At first glance, it's obvious there's a lot going on in this section with regard to colors, cultural practices, movements, and diversity of pieces. Some Pueblo influenced, some Apache, some Navajo, perhaps neither. What Girard attempted to achieve, I think, was a celebration of people and community. The Pueblo corn dance in the front and the center lends itself to a culture of movement where such images are common in today's Pueblos, with men, women, and children honoring the seasons of change and agricultural practices through song. Upon closer inspection, what's missing are the drums and rattles that play a central part in dance and ceremony. It's important to note that their hands are mere stubs with no corn or evergreens. The use of hands and feet are important for several reasons. One, they carry cultural items. They touch the earth and facilitate energies. But perhaps the idea of these figures in village scene really was intended to catch merely a glimpse, a snapshot of cultural traditions. But from a Pueblo perspective, these dancers are voiceless, without sound, without hand movements, which are severed from the very intention of why dance and ceremony exist in the first place. Above, at the top of this scene, and the village, in the village context, image seen here, we see an assortment of Kachina dolls, storytellers, masked figures, perhaps intended to represent the supernatural, as onlookers and protectors of people, which is really the intent from a spiritual sense. These figures, assembled into a pantheon of gods and goddesses, are out of context, misrepresented, and perpetuate the ongoing belief of pueblos worshiping multiple deities, often mistaken for engaging in polytheism. These false narratives are embedded in New Mexico's colonial practices and writings, perpetuated and cited over and over by archaeologists, anthropologists, collectors, and museum professionals. We also see an example of snakes throughout the exhibit. In this case, I interpret them as miniatures or curios to really just add as decorative elements. There's really no cultural context and connection. And I recognize that this is not an anthropological in nature exhibit, and that these miniatures skew time and space as mentioned before. And so again, it's thinking about the sense of time and how these are connected within a very small miniature setting, again, void of any context. And I'm wondering, I appreciate the previous presentation about what visitors take away, because often these stories, again, as people of stories, are repeated, what they tell their families and friends back home about the cultures and exhibits that are experienced here, not only at folk art, but in many museums, right? And so that's part of this larger narrative that I try to really just talk about this larger context of how things aren't always captured in particular miniature, perfect glass cases, right? Here's another image of the corn dance. Moving back to context. Our directions are land-based. There's no concept of north, south, east, or west per se. For example, as Tewa people, we call the east Tampia, where the sun rises. Our mountains define our boundaries. Tseshuping, Tsikamuping, Koseping, Okoping. Looking south from Santa Fe, we see the back of Okoping, Turtle Mountain. Most people refer to it as the Sandia Mountains. This is a very descriptive way of thinking about the back of the turtle. Can everybody see that? And I think I took this picture myself. It's a very beautiful image, and it really marks the boundaries of place and the context of how we operate and organize knowledge systems. Unlike other tribes that relocated or the, quote, more nomadic tribes, Pueblo people are place-based. Just like the United States turns to the National Archives in D.C., or the Catholic Church looks to the Vatican in Rome, our Pueblo memory and archives are located here. Since time immemorial, we look to these surrounding landscapes for knowledge and spiritual nourishment. Being in Tewa is also the word for mountain, which can mean heart. In many respects, these are one and the same, as the heart of the mountain is often the heart and soul of the ecological body, not as ownership, but in relationship to all things seen and unseen. To honor Ogapoge as a place and context is to recognize that we live within this vast landscape surrounded by trickster stories and coyote voices. In contrast to Girard, O'Keeffe's, and many of their contemporaries, this is a home not to capture, but a homeland that is conducive to all things spiritual and what we think about the place name of Ogapoge. Kundawa, thank you very much. And I just want to leave with this. We think about, again, this notion of place and museums, settings, but we have to really connect the larger way of how we even come to walk in a place of Santa Fe. That context, and this was stated earlier, really matters to understanding of how people and figures get placed within exhibits and interpreted. That part of that interpretation includes connections and direct places to land and people and everything that has come before us that'll continue to be here. So thank you very much. Look forward to questions.